Have you ever seen the Hamilton musical?
When I pause like that. So we went to see it and I walked out. I didn't like it.
You walked out of Hamilton?
I walked out of I know it's pretty shameful. I know.
Like,
I just didn't. It didn't. Diane and I. I'll blame it on my wife. No, it was my fault. Can we dive in? The art of inspiring and motivating teams for leaders. That's our theme for today. Metacasters is how do we as leaders inspire the art and craft, the practice of inspiring and then motivating those pesky teams and those team members, those individuals that report to us and even that don't. Where do we want to start, Josh?
well, uh, I'm going to get us away from the art of. We have a nasty run of episodes that are the art of, so we're going to have to come up with different words, but we won't do that right now. But yes, coming off of the communication episode, we talked about how important that was, and there were things that we wanted to dig into further. Like, okay, so you communicate effectively, but what are the things that you need to communicate? And inspiration was the first thing that popped into our heads separately. Like, we didn't even talk about it. We were discussing the episode and what we should talk about. Bob had effectively the same idea that I had, because it is so important, because that is a large part of your job. Oh yeah, like twins. I mean, just like look at us, just perfect twins. It's like the movie Twins, and you can guess who's Danny DeVito.
Did you enjoy that? Did that feel
Yes,
good to you?
it did.
Yes, it
I,
good.
and I was attempting to inspire you with that comment of
It
how
it
connected we are.
it rolled off my back, babe.
Yeah, yeah. So today's episode is all about how you inspire your teams, and the fact that you need to. Like, that's a core part of the job for many reasons. One, the job of whatever you're doing is hard. So,
Right.
like, having to slog away at something for weeks, months, years, whatever the term is for you and your team, whatever your team is building, that's a long, arduous task. And you finish that one, and I bet you're going to do it again. So there's like, okay, here we
Right.
go. How is this project different than the last one? How are we going to get fired up? How are we going to make sure we bring the best us? And that is a responsibility that you as a leader have.
One thing I think of is I when I teach leadership classes, I talk about a leader has a responsibility to become a why-inator and to explain why um, continuously. Why are you building this story? Why are we building this app? What problem are we trying to solve? Why does it matter? And really, and to me, that inspires. If you're artful in doing that, and and I talk about the notion of a compelling why. So we're building this because Josh, the CEO, said so, right? That's a why, but that doesn't get me. that
Yeah.
actually is a negative. That's a counter why to me. That's not going to get me jumping out of bed in the morning. That's not going to get me, excited. It's not going to inspire me. Uh, Now, for me nowadays, if you connect it to how does it make the world a better place, how does it help people, things like that, I really jazz me up. For me personally in my work, and then if someone's talking to me about that. So it's sort of the purpose, the why, connecting it. The other thing is, I think you have to connect that message to. So different generations have different connectors for why. Um, my, so I'm a boomer, and boomers. There is a little bit of do it because I said so in boomers, and that'll jazz me up. Whereas whatever generation X, Y, Z's, or you're going to have to connect to a different energy source. So you can't just have one size fits all in your inspiration. That's actually a challenge for me, and I try to grow into it. And I'll ask people for help. Like, did that land, or what would have been a better way to land that, so I can get some, sort of generational dexterity.
I was the son of boomers. So I've straddled both sides of that, and I certainly have a very strong internal motivation of I have a job and I'm going to do it well. What has flip flopped is the ability to be mobile, not like physically, with your career and your job. When I was coming out of college, the first time I changed jobs, my parents freaked out because they're like, You're ruining your career. Like, no one's going to want to hire you if you don't stay at a job for a long time." Because in that generation, it was one of those things. And especially where I grew up, you go to school maybe, and then you find a company and you work there for 30 years. And that's just what you do and you slog through it. Whereas with the advent of industries like ours and software, your mobility within your career drastically changes. So you have more choices, and your capability to say, I'm not happy here, and to go do something about it is much greater because it's not, well, there's like three companies in my city, and I'm going to work for one of them, and which one's like the least bad.
Right.
And really, it's accelerated now with after COVID and remote work. It's not even just like, okay, I got to be able to drive into the office. It's I can work for a company that's on the other side of the country. So that has
Right.
changed the way people think about what they're getting value from the career that they've chosen.
The other thing I want you to think about for inspiration is, so why is inspirational? Um, I Metacasters, I want you to think of positive inspiration and negative inspiration as a leader, almost like a battery. Whereas where, maybe we start net neutral, or if there's some bias or some, bad actors in the company, if you join a group, it might be net slightly negative. But now you're entering in that space, and so from an inspiration point of view, what are you doing? Are you raising the battery? Are you staying neutral? Or are you being negative with the battery? Why is one of those things. If you have inspiring whys, you're adding to the battery. You're charging the inspiration battery. If you're talking about just do it, just suck it up and do it. Do it because I said so. And Josh, I still hear leaders to this day.
Yeah.
I would have thought that went away. Yeah, right. Do it because I'm the boss. Do it because I have hierarchical power. But it doesn't. It's still ineffective. It's probably even more ineffective today. But I still hear it quite a bit, or people revert to that if they don't get the behaviors they want. So that's negative. So I want you to think about how are you, inspiring. And if you're net negative, you're gonna take a lot of work to go net positive. It's not like one good why story. If you've been a wiener for as a leader for like a year, and been obnoxious and told people to do stuff, and then you have one positive affirming why story, I don't think that flips the world on its ear. You have work to do. That's a nice start. And any reactions to that, Josh?
Yeah, the what I've seen with leaders that struggle to make that transition, something in their background has taught them that they can't trust their team. You go back to the first episode, we started with the reboot here, and it started with trust. And it's it's weird because I ask those leaders and I say, do you believe that members of your team come to work and they say, you know what, I'm going to do a shitty job and I'm going to go home happy because I
Right.
just I screwed everything up. Like, nobody wants to. I'm sure there's somebody, but the greater masses just want to make a difference. They want their work to mean something, and they want to know that, hey, the thing that I did delivered value for somebody, and people yearn for that. And when you keep them at arm's length, because you don't trust them, that's too much information, blah blah blah, whatever your excuses are, that's because it's almost like they don't have this belief that humans are inherently good. And so it's like, well, I got to keep them in line. And it's like, no,
Right.
you don't. You need to empower them, and then like magical things happen. But that that hurdle of like, can I trust them with this information is just astounding to me.
Did you ever hear that phrase though? I'm acting like my parents.
Oh
So
yeah.
that I agree. I know my parents were had some bad patterns, and I'm trying to change. But then I behave that way because that's how I was raised. I'm wondering, Josh. I think my guess is that a part of it is they were never trusted,
Yeah.
right? So they don't know like those leaders grew up not being trusted. Probably they might not be trusted now,
Yeah.
or fully trust, and they don't feel trusted. And so I think they're struggling with how do I even give it? Like they're not adept at doing it. I almost think it's like this huge or a transition like a pivot that has to happen mentally,
Hmm.
emotionally, where you have to just pivot into it when you and I think that's probably I've seen a lot of distrust hierarchically in organizations. It's not just the middle management. It's hierarchical trust, and it's really hard to extend it if no one's giving it to you. But that's
Yeah.
the thing. Or inspiration. It's really hard to inspire folks if you're not being,